What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another Fish the Moment live stream. I'm so excited to get back to doing some live streams and talking with you guys. I've not done a live stream for about 3 or 4 months now, and so it's great to be able to get back to this, especially when there's a lot of people who are trying to figure out, what to do when they can't go out and fish or go out to the store or do anything like that. So crazy times we're living in, but I'm really excited to get back and talk to fishing with you guys. So today in this stream, what I really want to talk about is how you can break down a lake using Navionics and Google Earth when you basically have nothing to do at home and you can't go fishing. And so there are a lot of ways that I'll prepare for fishing trips using Navionics, using Google Earth, and ways I break down lakes. And I'm basically just going to take an example lake, which is Greers Ferry Lake in central Arkansas, and show you how I break it down with both Navionics and Google Earth, and just the things I'm looking for, what I'm paying attention to, and how I get prepared for a fishing day. And so I want to walk you through every step of the process, and I'm just going to jump straight into it. And there's a lot of guys on the stream right now. We got Gary, Timo, John, Michael, Dean, all the regulars. So great to see you guys. And basically, we're just going to go straight into it so that way guys who are watching this back on YouTube can get straight to the content. And if you are watching this live, then feel free to leave any questions or anything in the stream when you can do the chat and things like that. And I will try to get those questions at the end of the stream. I'll take a break halfway through to answer questions as well. And so I will get to your question if you leave one there. And if you do want your question answered, just leave an @FishTheMoment. That way I'll see that you have a question, then put some question marks at the end of your chat. So other than that, let's just jump straight into it and start breaking down the lake. So let me just get this set up over here. And bear with me, guys. I do have some different setups going for the live stream now, and I haven't done this for like 3 months, so bear with me if I'm a little bit choppy on the streaming stuff. So let me just get this pulled up here. So first thing we're going to pull up right now is, actually, let me just pull up, we're going to pull up Google Earth. Get this going over here. There we go. Good to see Donald, Kevin, MJ, Brent, Dean, got Express, Jack, Tony. What is up, guys? Good to see everyone. So first thing I'm going to do, guys, is start by breaking down this lake at a high level using Google Earth. And Google Earth is probably the #1 tool that bass fishermen can use to break down a lake, more than Navionics, more than a paper map, or even more than getting help from a friend. If you understand how to utilize all the capabilities of Google Earth, you're going to be a lot more efficient and effective at finding bass. And I do have videos specifically about how to break down lakes using Google Earth and how to download Google Earth, everything like that. So if you just go to YouTube and type in Fish the Moment Google Earth, it'll be the first video that pops up. And so for this breakdown, I'm using Google Earth Pro, which is the desktop version of Google Earth. And it's really important to use Google Earth Pro because basically, it gives you this function where you can actually turn back time, and you can go up to this little clock with the arrow points to the left, and you can actually scroll through some aerial photos and see times when the lake is at different water levels. So for example, if we zoom into this little point right here, you can see in this image, the water level is drawn down somewhat, and as we take the lake back up, it's a little bit higher. And at different levels, you can see these old aerial footage, these aerial photos. Some of them aren't very good. Some of them are pretty good. And the one I found that worked really well was actually this November of 2012. It has a pretty good image of this lake when it's down a little bit lower. And before we actually get to these aerial footage and all that stuff, what I want to do is actually just get rid of that and start looking at this lake specifically just at a high level for 2 factors. One is the water clarity, and one is the type of cover available on the lake. Those are the first 2 things you want to look for when you're breaking down the lake. And what I like to do, I'm just going to treat Greers Ferry Lake as a lake that I've never been to, even though I've been there a lot. And the reason I'm doing that is just because I can show you some decent little areas here. And also, I get like 50 comments a month about checking out Greers Ferry Lake. And so definitely going to hopefully make some people happy with this breakdown of Greers Ferry. I'm seeing questions, guys, a ton of people in here. We got Steve, James, we got Table Rock Kid, and Quincy, Big C, Kevin. If I'm missing people, then sorry about that. But again, I will get everyone's questions. I'll take a break about 15 minutes in after I go through some of this Google Earth stuff, answer some stream questions, and I'll jump back and talk about some other stuff as well. So basically, when I'm starting out my breakdown, first, the most important thing to do is try to analyze the water clarity. The water clarity is really important because it's going to dictate how deep you need to be fishing, as well as maybe the size of the fish you're catching, as well as the approach and the techniques you're going to use. And so one thing you will notice right away when you take a look at Greer's Ferry from a high level is that the bottom end of this lake is very, very clear down by the dam. And you can tell this water is clear because it has this dark, kind of blue, dark green color to it, almost black somewhat. And that means that water has a lot of visibility, anywhere from, let's say, 5 to 10 feet of water visibility. So this is a very clear lake on the lower end. And then as you move up the lake, out of the clear end, kind of going up the chute, you'll notice that the water gets a little bit more dingy. And what I mean by that is that the water clarity starts to go from this kind of darker, kind of green to maybe a little bit lighter green, more of like a grass green color. I'm actually colorblind, so apologize if I'm getting the colors wrong. I'm just going off of what I think the colors are. But you'll get this little bit more stained water when you get that more green color. That's anywhere from maybe 3 to 4 feet of visibility, maybe 2 to 4 foot of visibility. And then in certain parts of this lake, if you go way back into some of these creeks, you'll get areas where the water is kind of this brighter green. And this color here is actually dirty water, where you have maybe a foot of visibility. And so it's really good whenever you get to a lake to establish where the different water visibilities are and where the visibility changes are. And it's especially important on Greer's Ferry because this lake actually has all 3 species of bass in it. You have spotted bass, smallmouth, and largemouth bass. And usually what I find is that when you have a lake that has a mixture of species, you'll find that if you have smallmouth bass in your lake, they're usually going to be down in the clearer water end of the lake. You're also going to have more spotted bass in the clearer end of the lake than largemouth. You will have some largemouth that live in the clear end as well, but usually there's not going to be as many. And then as you come up the lake into the dirtier water, you're going to have a lot fewer smallmouth, probably just maybe 10% of the population will be smallmouth, and the majority of the population is going to be largemouth bass. And so for tournament guys and guys who are trying to catch a good bag of fish, sometimes you may want to focus more on the dirtier end of the lakes where you have that dirtier water, because that's where you'll have a bigger concentration of largemouth bass. And those largemouth usually are going to be a little bit bigger and weigh a little bit more than your smallmouth bass and your spotted bass. Now, that's not to say that you can't catch big largemouth down by the dam on Greer's Ferry. And I have caught like 3 and 4 and 5 pounders down in this area of Greer's Ferry in that clear water, but they're a little bit tougher to catch, and we'll kind of get into that in a little bit too of why that is. But the first thing, again, I'm analyzing is just that water visibility. And so a couple things you're going to learn from that water visibility. First, if you're fishing in this really clear water, it's going to mean that you're going to have to use a lot different tactics than you will if you're fishing in this really dirty water. And as many of you guys know, if you're fishing in that clear water, it means a lot more finesse approaches, like a drop shot, a Ned rig, a shaky head, stuff like that. Or if there's wind and cloud cover, you might be able to catch fish on reaction baits, like a crankbait, a jerkbait, a spinnerbait. And usually what I like to do when I'm fishing a lake is pick out an area that's in the clear end of the lake and also pick an area that's in the dirty end of the lake. Because usually the fish bite really well on these clear ends of the lake when you have a lot of wind and you have some cloud cover. So the wind and the cloud cover really get these fish excited on these clear end of these lakes. But when you don't have any cloud cover, you have bright bluebird skies, no wind, it makes the fishing really tough on the clear ends of these lakes. These fish can see your bait from a mile away and they get really picky because there's 10 foot of visibility. They can see your bait coming from 30, 40 feet away, and that bait needs to really be very similar to what those fish are eating, a perfect match to what they're eating, and you also have to present it in a really natural way to get those fish to bite. And so instead of just trying to force that bite in that clear water when you have bright sunny skies, no wind, what I like to do is actually run to the dirtier water, the dirtier sections of these lakes, and actually try to fish where you have, like, let's say 1 to 2 foot of visibility. What happens when you have 1 to 2 foot of visibility on those bright sunny days is that even though that sun is out, those fish can't see very far in the water because there's limited visibility. And that makes it so that the bass basically are not going to get a good look at your bait. And so if you bring, let's say, a spinnerbait or a crankbait by them, it doesn't need to be a perfect match to what they're eating because that water's murkier, it's muddier, and it will camouflage your bait. And another really good thing about this dirtier water is that these fish are going to live shallower. They're going to live in, let's say, 5-6 foot of water and less if you get into like a foot water visibility. And as you get a little bit clearer, maybe 2 foot of visibility, those fish might live a little bit deeper, like maybe 10 to 15 feet, but they're not going to be living in 30-40 feet of water like they might be living on the clear end of the lake. And so right away from just looking at Google Earth, we've been able to establish where the clear water is, where the dirty water is, and we've kind of been able to pick up 2 different areas based on the conditions we might face in the lake. If we have a bright, sunny day, no wind, we're going to be launching our boat up here and run into the dirty water. If you have a day where it's windy, cloudy, things like that, maybe a good idea to run to the clear water. That's kind of my approach for fishing tournaments, and that's kind of what I do when I used to fish tournaments. We actually would launch up here in this part of the lake, and what I would do based on the weather conditions is either decide to run up into this arm of the lake or maybe this arm of the lake where it's a little bit muddier, or I would run down here into this Cove Creek area and down by the dam, depending on what the weather conditions gave me. And that made me really consistent on Greer's Ferry, and actually I've won probably like 7 or 8 tournaments on Greer's Ferry. I love this lake, and I always catch them really well just because I'm always able to adapt to the conditions. And obviously this lake doesn't set up like every lake in the country, and I'm going to be making more live streams basically weekly going forward so that I can talk about a lot of topics that I can't get to in my normal videos. And I'll be covering like natural lakes, Tennessee River lakes, river systems, lakes down in Florida, all kinds of stuff so that you guys can get a good sense of how I break down all these different styles of lakes. And I think that'll be really helpful for you guys. And if you do want to have me look at your lake in particular, a specific lake, what you can actually do is book a one-on-one fishing lesson with me. And I do these every single week with guys. And I have 6 spots available every single week. And you can just go to my website, fishthemoment.com. You can actually get schedule a virtual fishing lesson where I can break down your lake with you in over Google Hangout and kind of like this live. And I'll go through Google Hangout, Google Earth, mark up spots for you so that you can see exactly where I would be fishing and talk about the strategy of how I approach your lake, how the conditions will affect your fish, everything like that. And I do have a reviews page that I need to update because I just have people send me the reviews, and I have a bunch of them here if you guys want to see them. And you can just read through those. And then also, you just book a time here. And then another thing too, I don't want to get caught up on this too long, but I do actually have some more map breakdowns of specific lakes that I've broken down available on my website. And I'm actually really excited because I just started a partnership with a Bassmaster Elite Series pro, Randy Blockett. And he actually did a Table Rock, Missouri spring breakdown. This is brand new on the website. It's spring areas in Table Rock Lake, and Randy actually guides on Table Rock, and he's made combined 18 Bassmaster Classics / Forest Wood Cups and has $1.9 million in earnings for his career. He's fished for like over 20 years. He's won several big Bassmaster tournaments, and he is actually doing the breakdowns for me just because I don't have enough time to get to them. And so we're going to be breaking down Table Rock for all 4 seasons. We actually have all those done already. And then we're breaking down lakes all across the country. There should be like 4 maps coming out a week. So we're going to have like Gunnersville, Toledo Bend, Chickamauga, all these lakes all around the country. And I'm really excited to kind of get these more breakdowns out to you guys. So if you are interested in some Table Rock spots, check this out. And if you do have a certain lake that you really want us to break down on the map, then just leave it in the comments of this live stream or just on my social media somewhere, or just book a virtual fishing lesson with me and I can break down that lake with you, especially if it's a smaller lake. So enough of that. Let's get back to the Hangout here, or the Google Earth here. And again, I will be getting all these questions. I got a bunch of guys asking about hats. We need to bring back the hats. And I'm seeing a few other things, but there's a bunch of other questions here. I'll get back to these here in a few minutes. Just give me a few minutes here. But let's keep breaking this down. So now that we've kind of established the water clarity, that's kind of somewhat basic, but it's really important. The next thing that I would look at is the available cover on the lake. What type of cover is available? What things can I be fishing? And so to do that, I just scroll through the lake, and I like to pick an image of this lake where it's drawn down slightly. So an actual image where that lake isn't at full pool. And so if we take a look right here, we actually have a great image of this lake drawn down slightly, and we can just start getting a feel for what types of cover are in this lake, things that we can try to fish. And to do this, again, I'm just going to scroll through every cove and every pocket on this lake and see what looks good. So right here, you can actually see there's a really nice rocky spot, rocky transition. I've caught a lot of smallmouth off that little spot right there. It's offshore. We have some bushes in the water. We have some nice riprap around a boat ramp, a couple boat ramps stick in the lake. We have some nice kind of chunk rocks on a gravelly banks here. Keep going down. You can see a lot of these banks are actually just kind of mud and flat banks. But then every once in a while, you'll get a little bit of mixture of like rock for like man-made stuff or just like rocky points that can be potentially good. And I'll get into all these specific spots here in a second, but I just want to show you, this is kind of what I do in general. I don't get so caught up on a specific spot right now when I'm trying to just start breaking down a lake. I just want to get a feel for what's available because, yeah, I might, get to this creek and start, okay, let's drop a pin and start marking this. Ooh, this looks good. This looks good. Well, maybe it looks good in this creek, but if I go to the next creek over, there could be things that look 10 times better, maybe in this pocket or this pocket. And so I'm going to scroll through every single creek in the lake to try to see what is available and what there is to fish before I start getting and falling in love with a specific area. So I do like this kind of dam or this little dike that runs here. It's kind of interesting. I'm just going to kind of scroll through here somewhat quickly. This is exactly what I do when I'm, I'm not even on Navionics. I apologize, guys. I am. See, this is the thing. This is why I need to keep doing the stream. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Wrong screen. Everyone's freaking out. Okay. So, anyways, let me go back to that. First live stream in like 3 months, guys. We're gonna get all these kinks worked out. Need to get back in the groove. Anyway, so back over here. So what I was saying is I'm just gonna pick out an image here of oh man, this delay is good. Let me there we go. Okay, so we should be back up and running. So anyways, so gonna run down, find an image of this lake when it's kind of drawn down back in time, and like I mentioned before, here's a nice little like rocky spot, rocky little transition right here. Looks good. We have some bushes in the water, which is a certain type of cover. More bushes. We have some really nice rock or riprap with some boat ramps. We had that kind of chunk rock channel swing area. It's kind of like that pea gravel rock mixing in with that chunkier rock. And you can see, like I mentioned, there's a lot of just like flat banks with nothing going on, like no cover, nothing. And then all of a sudden you'll find like little stretches where you get a little bit of rock mixing with that kind of sandy bottom, more rock that's kind of man-made here, and some nice rocky points. And so there's all kinds of stuff you can see just looking through Google Earth. And again, before I get tied into a certain area, I'm just going to basically just do this thing where I'll scroll through everything and just kind of go pretty quick to see if anything stands out. And this is actually a really good section lake that I've caught a lot of fish in before, so we'll kind of talk about that. But I'll roll through this area and then I'll kind of see, okay, what else is there available here? Well, one thing I like right away is, boom, there's a nice underwater road. What does that look like when the lake is up? See, that's kind of nice. There's an old like road or something that runs underneath there with an old culvert. That's pretty interesting. And you can just kind of scroll through and just see what's available. We have some boat docks here. Some marina docks are kind of good. Not really loving what's on the banks here. It's a lot of just kind of mud banks, nothing really happening. So I'm just going to keep scrolling through and looking at these banks. And I'm going to save you guys the trouble and just take you spots where I actually know. But just imagine me doing this now for like 30 more minutes. I'm just going to go through and like look through every pocket and every cove in the lake. And you might think this is going to take a long time. And it does. It does take a lot of time. And it's not something that, a lot of guys do because it's just so time consuming and these lakes are so big. But it's really important to do because just by looking at Google Earth, you can eliminate so much water and find so many unique, interesting things that you wouldn't find when you're driving down the lake because you're not going to be paying that much attention to like every inch of the bank. Or it'll just save you a bunch of gas having to run around all these areas. And so let me just start by breaking down a couple areas that I've caught a lot of fish in the past. And one of those areas is kind of this zone here where we have this creek channel swinging on Google Earth, as well as this zone here. And this is the Cove Creek area where I've caught a ton of smallmouth and stuff over the years. And then this is the lower end of the lake, and then we're going to break down a couple creeks up in here as well to give you an idea of what I'm looking for. And, I kind of would pick these areas first by looking at that water clarity, but the other thing I'm going to actually look at is Navionics, and we're going to switch back over there to Navionics. And this time I'm meant to be there, which is good. And Logan said, it's okay, we forgive you. Thank you guys for forgiving us. JT, good to see you guys, by the way. So anyways, so we got the lake here. So one thing that a lot of guys have a misconception about is that I use Navionics a lot to break down my lakes, and that's actually not true. I hardly ever look at Navionics before I get to the lake. Usually I just use Navionics to kind of give me a general idea of how deep the water is and maybe some general ideas of where some good offshore areas are, some good deeper channel swing banks, stuff like that. But I'm really not all that concerned about Navionics from like a specific contour line perspective until I get to the lake. I'm not going to go on Navionics and scour the map and say, okay, well, let me look for this specific point or this specific, zone or whatever it is, this little drop or whatever. I find that when I do that, I always get overwhelmed by the number of areas that I could potentially graph. And usually what I'll do is, instead of trying to hone in on specific contour lines and specific spots before I go to the lake, what I like to focus on is, again, that water clarity, but also the available cover you have around. So is there rock around there? Is there standing timber? Things like that. That's the most important thing you can gauge before you go to the lake. And then a lot of times I will actually analyze these maps while I'm on the water. And I'm going to let the fish dictate what stuff I'm looking at. And the reason I do that mainly is because it's very easy to get caught up looking at a map and saying, man, look at this really nice point that sticks out into the lake here. It drops off in this main river channel. There's a nice channel swing point here. Look at all these great contours. And you're just going to go to every single spot on the contour line map that looks pretty. And so you're going to say, okay, well, ooh, look at this right here. The channel swings right here. And then we got a hump right here. Oh, man, I'm going to go graph all this stuff. I'm just going to spend hours and hours and hours going and graphing and looking at this stuff. Well, that's great, but the problem is that you're going to get this preconceived notions of where you want to be looking, where you want to be fishing, before you even let the fish tell you where they are. You have to listen to the fish. You have to fish the moment if you're going to be a successful angler. What I mean by that is, what if you're out here graphing in the middle of the lake in 30 or 40 feet of water, and every single fish is actually in the very backs of these creeks, and they're just crushing in shallow bushes, and there's shad back in there, and there's eating all over the place. Or maybe you start trying to fish the middle of these creeks, and you're looking for nice secondary points on these graphs where channel swings in, but the fish are actually on these main lake points more towards the main river channel, a little bit deeper. And what happens to a lot of guys is that they'll get caught up looking for hours and hours in the wrong area of the lake, the wrong section of the lake, and it doesn't matter how much map study you do before you get to the lake, if you're not paying attention to the conditions and paying attention to what's available, the types of cover, stuff like that, you're not going to be a very successful fisherman. And so really, I don't look at these maps in depth until I get to the lake. And what I'll do once I get to the lake is I'm just going to first launch my boat. Let's say I launch my boat right here at this boat ramp right here. First thing to do, let's say, is know that, okay, well, this area of the lake is a good area, again, on a windy, cloudy day. So we have some winds, we have some cloud cover. Where could these fish be pulling up? Well, I've talked about this in our videos before, but really the way I think about it is these fish can be in one of four places on this lake. They can be on the main lake out here, kind of on this offshore structure. They can be in the first third of these creeks right here, the middle of the creek, or the back of the creek. That's where these fish are going to be, one of those four zones. And in my opinion, there's going to be about 60 to 70% of the bass in a very specific zone. So 60 to 70% of the bass are going to be either on the main lake, first third of the creek, middle of the creek, back of the creek. Now, you will have fish that are in all parts of these creeks. You'll have 10% of the bass in the main lake, 10% in the first third of the creek, 10% in the middle, 10% in the back. But when you go to the lake, what you want to really find is where those fish are within these creeks. What section of the majority of the fish using? And to do that, I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to be looking for bait fish. And the second is that I'm going to be looking for birds. Those are the two things I really use to determine what the fish are doing. If you can see bait fish on your fish finder, that means that there's probably going to be a concentration of bass somewhere nearby. Because bass eat shad, they eat the bait fish. And so if you're not seeing a lot of bait fish, the chances of there being a really big population of bass there are slim. The only exception is if you have a lot of really, really nice rock in the area. A lot of times you'll see that there's some crawfish or something that might be getting in that area. And that kind of goes back to your Google Earth study where where would these crawfish be? Well, rocky areas. Well, where's a good rocky area? Well, maybe right here. This looks like a really good rocky area. And actually, I need to transition over to Google Earth. Let me do this real quick. There we go. This right here. So where's a good rocky area? Right in through here. All this rock. This is a great place for some crawfish to dig around these rocks and these boulders, all kinds of stuff. And you basically are, going to be able to make an inference that there will be some crawfish, things like that, in these rocks, just based on the fact that that's where the crawfish will live. But at the same time, not just looking for crawfish, I'm also looking for bait fish. And so a lot of times what I'll do when I start getting to the lake, and this is something that actually Brian Thrift, he's my favorite bass fisherman in the world. I love Brian Thrift. And one thing he talked about in one of his podcasts that he does is he said the best way to break down a lake when you get there is to burn gas. And what he means by that is to just run your boat and run into every single creek and every single pocket and just burn gas, trying to see what's available in terms of what the water clarities look like, because you can get some sense from Google Earth, but it's not going to be perfect, and also where the forage is. And that's what I like to do when I get to a new lake is I will burn gas and basically run into the backs of all these creeks. I'm going to graph around the main lake. I'm going to run into maybe 2 or 3 of these creeks. I'll run up the lake over here, run the back of this creek, check over here, run the back of this creek, and I might run 15, 20 miles before I even make a cast. And before you guys start saying, man, you're burning a lot of gas, I can't do that, that's not the way that, it's too much money, then yeah, that is definitely not the approach for you. But if you want to be really successful and really, like winning tournaments, stuff like that, if you're a tournament caliber wrangler, stuff like that, running around on the lake and just burning gas and running into as many areas as possible is one of the best ways you can improve your fishing and get better at fishing, because you're going to put yourself in a lot better situations the more water you cover, the more areas you look at. For example, one year when I was fishing on Greers Ferry, I found that I was getting kind of stuck in this creek. I launched in Shiloh Creek, and I was fishing all through this creek, and I wasn't getting any bites. And this was when I was like 13, 14 years old. And I fished all up and down this creek. I said, there's some nice rock here. There's all kinds of stuff here. Boat docks, marinas, there has to be fish here. And I fished this creek for like 3 hours, and never got a bite, fished from the mouth all the way to the back. And then next thing I did is I actually just ran, and I said, okay, well, let me run a couple creeks up. And I ran all the way back here in the back of this creek. And right when I got back in here, I noticed there were birds everywhere. They were diving on the surface, and there were bait fish all over the graph. And as I got back in here, fish started busting and schooling, and I caught a limit of fish in like 20 minutes throwing a topwater spook in the back of this creek. And it was just so obvious. It was like, man, of course there's fish here. There's bait all over. There's birds everywhere. Of course the fish are going to be in this creek. And the only way that I would have known those fish were there is if I actually took the time to run back into this creek and look at it. Now, you might be wondering, why did I run into that creek? Well, fortunately, back then I was still a big fan of Google Earth, and what I did is I looked at the back of all these creeks and I saw what is going on in the back of these creeks, what kind of looks interesting. And one thing I noticed in this creek is that there was a lot of standing timber, and I knew that during my tournament it was going to take a long time to get back into this creek, so I actually didn't bother with this creek just because it was going to take a while to navigate. But the reason I chose this creek in particular is that it didn't have as much standing timber, and also when you got back in here, look at all this rock that's back in here in the center of this ditch. There's rock everywhere. There's a nice kind of channel swing bank. It looks beautiful, and it looks very different from the backs of some of these other creeks in the area. The backs of some of these other creeks, they have some rock and stuff back in there, but it's not like there's that really good chunk rock all over the back. There's a little bit here and there, and especially over here in Shiloh Creek, there was not near as much of that rock. Just a few isolated boulders here and there. And so that was the reason why I picked that creek, and it was because of what I found on Google Earth. Another example of finding a spot on Google Earth that helped me do well in the tournament is I was just looking through a Cove Creek, and what I did is basically pick this area of the lake because I knew it was going to be windy and cloudy, and I knew that wind was going to be blowing from the north and like due north. It's going to be kind of a post-front day. That wind's blowing straight across into this creek, and I knew this bank was going to get hammered by wind. And I thought, okay, this could be a really good bank to fish because that wind's going to be blowing on it all day. And I did think about fishing out on this main bank around in here, and I did look at all these different areas, but when I started really looking at this bank here, and I knew that wind was going to be crashing in, I noticed that every once in a while down this bank, I would zoom through here, and I would notice that there was small little sections where you would find some rock. And you get these like rock veins that ran through this lake. See that rock vein right there? That's what I was looking at. And what I found is that the fish were setting up on these little rock veins, and the water was about this level. The rock was just it was just barely in the water. It was a little bit higher than this, I think, just slightly, so that this rock was underwater. And what I did is actually, because I was fishing a tournament and I had my boat, I marked these waypoints on my fish finder like this, and I just on Google Earth, and I just called this rock ridge. And I marked up this rock ridge with some waypoints. And I did rock ridge, stuff like that. And I marked up these rock ridges. Now, what I was able to do then is actually transfer these waypoints to my fish finder, and I actually have a video on my YouTube channel. If you can type in Fish the Moment Google Earth, I have a complete video about how to download Google Earth, how to get the images to go back in time, how to drop the waypoints, how to transfer these waypoints to your fish finder so that these waypoints actually show up on your map, on your fish finder. They'll show up right on top of your map. It'll overlay right on top of your Navionics, on top of your Google or your Lake Mastership, and it'll just show a waypoint, rock ridge, and it's super helpful. And so I would mark up like these rock ridges right here. I kept going down these banks, and I noticed that there were a few stretches, like see this little like small like rock right there. I would mark this. I would drop a little rock there. I'm not going to name everything just for sake of time here, guys. And then I would see like, ooh, look at this right there. There's a little boat ramp right there. That looked really good. And then I just kept going down this bank trying to see if there's anything interesting, and I saw that there was this little rocky like spot right there. That looks pretty good. And I just kept doing this. I went down this whole bank, and you guys kind of get the idea now of what I'm doing. And I would just run through here, and I marked up a bunch of these little rocky spots. And the morning of that tournament, I came in, and that wind started just pushing through this area. It was going like crazy, and it was slamming into these banks. And within the first 45 minutes of the morning, on this rock ridge right here, I caught a 3.5 pound and a 4 pounder. It was a 3.5 pound smallmouth and a 4 pound largemouth. And I finished out my limit on all these other little rocky spots right here. I weighed in like 13.5 pounds and won the tournament by like 4 pounds. I caught all my fish in the first 45 minutes. And it was all because I had taken the time to kind of locate these areas, and I'd never fished these areas before in my life. This was when I was like, I think 16 years old and did this. And so, never fished these areas before in my life, didn't have a chance to go practice, but I knew that that wind direction was coming from the north. I knew that this water was clear, and that I could probably catch some fish if I found some rock down there. And so, that was really helpful and helped me win that tournament. Now, let's say that maybe instead of these banks, that wind blowing from the north, let's say the wind is blowing from, let's say, the due west direction, this west wind. Well, if that wind's blowing from the west, then maybe instead of trying to focus on fishing this bank down here, I might want to try to find an area where that wind's going to pick up a lot of steam and kind of hit in, like maybe right over here. Now, obviously, these islands are going to protect this bank a little bit, but maybe like this little stretch right through here might be a good stretch to check out. And so, as you can see here, we have some nice rock right here that looks really good, some nice rocky banks. And then, like, look at this right here. That's a great little rocky point, some like kind of shelf rock. So I would go through here and I would mark up the shelf rock, and I would just kind of drop some waypoints. And I would know that if that wind was blowing due west, this is a good area to check out. Another really good point right here off the main lake. And I would go now down this whole western bank and maybe also check over on like this part of the lake over here to try to see those western banks, which ones are getting hit and which ones have some nice chunk rock banks on them. And I would then start running a lot of these chunk rock banks where the wind is blowing in. And the type of banks, the type of cover and all that stuff you're going to be focusing on, guys, is going to change depending on what lakes you're fishing. And so again, if you do want to understand, like for your lake specifically, what things you need to be looking at, I will be doing a lot of other streams going forward once a week on all different types of lakes. You'll know what things you need to be looking for, what types of cover, things like that. And obviously the seasons are going to change what things to look for as well. And so, sometimes you'll be looking more in the backs of the creek, sometimes you're looking more on the main lake. All kinds of factors are going to affect bass fishing. So this is a very high level overview of how to break down a lake, and it's not really taking into account seasonal patterns and all the really specific details. But I do want to give you guys just like a high level understanding of what I'm trying to do when I'm breaking down a lake, my thought process, because regardless of the time of year, regardless of the lake I'm on, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to look for the water clarities, look for the available cover. I'm trying to analyze what the conditions are going to give me. And then, obviously, last but not least, I'm going to take that to the lake and try to figure out where those fish are. And so, one really good thing that I've learned over the years is that you cannot be too prepared going into a fishing day in terms of your Google Earth study. Google Earth is my number one tool. It's what's won me more tournaments than anything else out there. I've been using Google Earth Pro or Google Earth, like all this stuff, since I was like 13 years old. And this was my number one competitive advantage for 7 years when I was fishing tournaments. It's because I would just dig into this Google Earth stuff. And another case in point is another tournament I fished, which was actually I was fishing as a co-boater, and the guy I was fishing with didn't have any fish in the boat in like 11 o'clock, and we actually went back into this area that I found in Google Earth because he had nothing else to do, and we came in here and he ended up finishing like 7th place in the tournament out of 100 boats, and I finished like 4th, and it was so funny. I did that a lot where guys would be terrible at in their tournaments, and I would actually suggest spots halfway through as a co-boater, and we'd catch them. But basically, if you look right here kind of in this back area, I was just kind of screwing around on Google Earth during class one day because we had computers back then in class, which was kind of nice. And, when we're not studying, I mean, what else are you going to do? Most people are playing video games and watching YouTube videos. I was on Google Earth breaking down my maps, and then I would download my SD cards and stuff. People are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, don't worry about it. Some guys were playing like flight simulators on Google Earth, but no, I was breaking down spots. I was using my class time wisely. I was doing my studying. It was my fishing studying, but it was studying. Anyways, so I was looking back in here, and there was a tournament that was in the spring, and basically I didn't know where this guy was going to be fishing, so I just kind of looked all around the lake and was just kind of seeing what was available. And I noticed back in the back of this creek that there was a lot of really good stuff. And the guy was like kind of fishing in this general area of the lake, just kind of randomly fishing stuff, not catching crap. And so I was like, hey, let's run back in the back of this creek. There's some cool stuff back in here. When we got back in here, on Google Earth, what I found is that there is a lot of really interesting man-made structure as well as some kind of just random stuff that's out here in the middle of the lake. And if we take a look at this area actually on Navionics, let me actually do the Navionics thing and switch it for you guys. If we look at this area on Navionics, it looks like nothing. It looks like there's nothing happening in here because that Navionics map only goes so far. And we can actually change it to the sonar chart, which doesn't make it any better. You can see that there's some like road beds that sometimes are there, but most of the time these road beds aren't actually there. It looks like it's just like 2 or 3 feet of water, and just looking at Navionics, you'd never know what is there. But if we go over to Google Earth, it's a completely different story. And so if we take a look on Google Earth, you can look in through here and see that there's all kinds of interesting stuff. There's all kinds of laydowns, logs are sticking out in the water. There's actually an old roadbed that's actually there, like shockingly, Navionics had it right. But more than just having a roadbed, there's a little culvert right here, and there's a little bit of rock, and there's another kind of just road that runs through here with another culvert back in here. And then there's all these little laydowns and stick-ups and stuff like that with another kind of rocky thing right here. And then there's actually a nice little rocky transition back in the very back of this. And we were fishing here in the spring when that water was up a little bit. It was kind of up at this level, maybe a little bit higher than this even. And what I told the guys, hey, let's go back in this area. It was like, I think it was March 28th or something like that. So it was like the fish were kind of getting ready to spawn, kind of pre-spawn spawn. And I said, let's roll through here and just fish some of these laydowns, fish this road bed that's back in here. And I kind of convinced him because I said there's a road bed and a culvert. And he's like, okay, let's go back in there. We went back in there, and off this little pipe, the dude caught 3 keepers and 3 casts. Boom, 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 off this little like old culvert thing. I caught some fish just fishing behind him. I only caught 3 keepers. He was a pretty good angler. From catching them, he couldn't find them, but he could catch them. And caught some fish off some laydowns in here. I think I caught 2 fish off laydowns and 1 fish actually off this little pipe off of a shaky head, or this culvert. He caught a fish off this culvert, caught 3 off this culvert, and then caught like another limit's worth of fish off all these little isolated stick-ups and laydowns. And you have never known this area was any good unless you actually took the time to go through here. It's actually a no wake zone through here, so you have to idle all the way through here. And a lot of guys kind of get caught up fishing the mouth of this because there's all this jagged rock, or they just kind of don't go too far back in here because they're like, oh, it gets too shallow. Because if you look at Navionics, it doesn't look good. But if you look back in here on Google Earth, it's awesome. It looks really, really good. So basically, this is what I, have been looking for. And then, there's also more areas I've caught them on, like way up this creek. You can keep going back in these areas and you can see there's like some rock transitions back in here. There's also just all kinds of random like stick ups and lay downs all the way back in this creek. And sometimes I'll go like all the way back in these creeks, especially certain times of the year when the fishing's kind of tough, and fish like isolated laydowns and stick ups and stuff way back in these creeks, like way up here to where my boat can't go any further. It's actually pretty good to do in the summertime. I'll fish like back into the creeks, like back in here, like way back in here. And you can find some really good fish sometimes fishing, when the water's high enough, you can kind of, sometimes you can skip over this if it's high enough. You get way back in these areas, and it's kind of sketchy, but it holds a lot of good fish sometimes. And that's what you can find in Google Earth Study that a lot of guys are just not going to be doing. And another thing that's great about Google Earth Study is that you're going to be able to find isolated little areas that other guys are missing. That's one thing I didn't mention about breaking down lakes with Navionics is that, fortunately or unfortunately, I think that with all the instruction on Navionics and contour line maps, maybe for myself and other people, everyone knows how to go onto a lake and look for a channel swing bank, or maybe looking for a good point with a channel swing off of it, or a long point that extends into the lake here. And all of these obvious areas are just getting hammered nowadays. Everyone's going through and just fishing these same areas over and over again, and you basically are not going to have a competitive advantage anymore because all these areas are so obvious. When I was learning to read contour line maps when I was like 12, 13, I had an advantage over people because most people didn't know how to read this contour line map and say, okay, here's a nice point dropping into a creek channel. Let's go fish a football jig off this point and crush them. And I was like one of the few people doing that, other than the locals who just knew the spot was there but didn't know about the contour line maps. But nowadays, everyone knows about these contour line maps, and anything that you see on here is pretty much known as a known entity, and it's pretty obvious to everyone, especially the guys who know what they're doing. And so the only way I found that I can really get a competitive advantage nowadays and find those really sneaky spots is by using my Google Earth really carefully. And a lot of things I'm looking for are, again, like these ugly banks that just look like they have nothing going on. For example, there's a bank like right here. It looks like there's nothing happening down this bank. There's no like rock. It's just kind of mud bank, nothing happening. But what I'll find when I'm going around here is all of a sudden you'll get this small little like rocky outcropping right here. Or you'll find that there's a little transition from like rock to sand. That right there, this spot has caught me so many big smallmouth over the years, and it's just like, I just call it like a rock transition. And that's the sort of thing where I can throw like a shaky head down there, and I'm not using Google Earth again, guys. I apologize. I'm still not on Google Earth. There we go. Looking down this bank where there's nothing happening, there's nothing going on, and you could go through here and you could find this like nice little rock transition. And most people are going to skip over this. They're not going to be looking for subtle stuff like this where you have this transition from the rock to nothing. And this may not work on your home lake. It might be something different. And what's productive is going to be, again, different on every single lake. So some lakes, this little ditch might be the best little stretch right here. Maybe if there's grass in your lake, that ditch that's underwater could be the deal. On Gross Ferry, it's not because it's the fish just don't get in that stuff. And that's just kind of knowing different lakes and what they do. But, you might be able to go through this lake and pick out 15 or 20 really subtle, kind of interesting areas that other people are overlooking and be a lot more efficient. And what I really try to figure out is, here's one thing too. Michael Grant saying, yes, some lakes may not have a drawdown or low level. So, yes, that is a great, that's a great comment there, and that is definitely true. There are a lot of lakes that don't have water drawn down, but that doesn't mean that you can't find stuff on lakes that don't have the water drawn down. So let me just give you an example of a lake. For example, Lake Dardanelle. I love Lake Dardanelle, and this lake has no images of that lake drawn down, not a single one of them. But I was able to find so many spots on Lake Dardanelle that other people basically have not been able to, don't know about or don't figure out just by looking at this map. And so one thing that, I found in Google Earth, again, is that water clarity is really important, but also just going back in some of these areas to see what type of water is available. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll come in to, let's say, a pocket or a creek. One of the pockets I've caught a lot of good fish in over the years is, I'm trying to figure out what I want to share because some of my friends might like kick my butt. But let me just go in here. So like this is a little zone right here. There's a little zone like right through here where that lake is up, and you can see that there's some really nice lily pads that run through this stretch. This is a great little stretch. The lake isn't drawn down, but you can see that there's lily pads there. You can also see kind of where you have those dips and turns in the lily pads. And by going back through the different years, you can see where are the lily pads growing really thick and where are they not growing so thick. So for example, in this stretch, you can see that these lily pads really die out in the winter time. They're not super thick, but you might find that in other stretches of the lake, like maybe up over here, the lily pads stay a little bit thicker year round. And a lot of times, like vegetation and stuff like that, it can be really helpful to know where does the vegetation stick around consistently. And that's one thing I've actually done a lot on the Arkansas River with Google Earth is if we go over to the Little Rock Pool or the Maumelle Pool of the Arkansas River, one thing I'm just trying to give you some ideas or just give you some examples of how you can use Google Earth even if you don't have a good image is like if you look at some of these banks down here, what I found over the years is that if you zoom in really carefully, you'll see that there's actually some, let me find a good image of this. There's this grass. See all this grass that's growing down the bank here? There's grass all through this area. And a lot of times people will go through this river and they will fish this main river bank grass. And there's bank grass all up and down this river. All through here you can see there's bank grass. And people love fishing bank grass on the main river. The problem is that not every patch of grass is good. But what I found over the years in the Arkansas River is the good stretches of grass are actually the grass stretches that are still there in the wintertime. A lot of times in the summer, that grass will get really thick and green, but in the wintertime, that grass will die down. And so, for example, if you take a look down this bank, you'll see that there's some grass stretches that stay where they are even when that water temperature drops in the 40s. And then when you get back to like the summertime, they'll get a lot thicker and greener, but the grass that stays there year round is the best grass. And this is not, I'm not giving you the best example here, guys, but apologize. I'm trying to go off the cuff on this one, but hopefully that makes sense. And all of my best grass stretches on these lakes are places where that grass, here's a good example, like you see this grass through here, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's gone. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's completely gone. Same thing like back in this backwater. There's some stretches of grass right here where sometimes it's gone, sometimes it's there. It kind of is patchy. But the grass that's always good on these fisheries are the grass that always sticks around. Those grass beds, they're always there year-round. Those are always your better grass stretches. So even with that lake not being drawn down, you can find so many interesting things with Google Earth. And I'm not always just finding offshore areas with Google Earth. A lot of times I'm looking at like a river system, for example, and looking at which backwaters have clear water in the back, or which backwaters can I get into, or if I'm going to like a Lake Maumelle that doesn't have a lake drawn down, which points can I visibly see have some sort of rock on them, even if it's just more of like a, the lake isn't drawn down, but I can kind of just visually see, okay, this bank right here has some nice rock. That's a good sign. If there's rock on top of the bank, there's probably rock going into the water. And so, again, there are limitations to Google Earth, but it is an amazing tool if you do utilize it properly. And again, I'm going to be getting into different ways to break down lakes and analyze lakes that fluctuate, lakes that don't fluctuate, all kinds of stuff using Google Earth. And so, again, that's going to be my upcoming live streams. And one thing I'm actually doing, guys, is for all my Patreon members, if you go to my Patreon page, which is just here right over there in the center of the screen, it's patreon.com/fishthemoment. It's a way that you can actually support my channel by just giving me a small monthly donation. And for my Patreon members, I used to do this in the past, and I kind of took the perk away when I was stopping the Fish Moment live stream, but my Patreon members are the ones that actually get to vote on the topics and the lakes for my live streams. And so if you join my Patreon page, you can actually vote on the lakes I break down during my live streams, as well as the topics I cover. And so I'm going to be doing a weekly live stream going forward. And so if there is something you really want to have discussed, talked about in the live stream, go over to my Patreon page and just do a small channel donation, and you'll be able to suggest stuff for these streams. And you also get other perks like a Patreon exclusive live stream and a few other things like that. But And then Rob's saying, I'd like to get your opinion on northern situations. Yep, I can definitely help with. I'm going to be doing that in live streams, all kinds of stuff, guys. Obviously, my lakes are in the south. I actually grew up, though, in Wisconsin, and all of my home lakes are actually up here. So I used to fish up on all of these lakes, all up and through here. We have, in Oshkosh, we have Lake Winnebago. We have, just all kinds of fisheries. Big Green Lake. You have Poygan, all kinds of Poygan Bay, all these different places where I used to fish all the time. Crystal Lake. This is where I learned to fish, the Madison Chain of Lakes. And so I have a lot of experience fishing up north. I spent basically half my life in Wisconsin fishing. And so I'm very familiar with fishing here, kind of Illinois, Michigan area as well. I just don't talk about it in my channel because I don't have any footage of me fishing there really, except for when I was like 12 years old, 13 years old. But hopefully, guys, this was kind of helpful, was kind of giving you some ideas of how I break down the lake. I feel like I was a little bit scattered on what I was talking about. Again, getting back to the live stream, talking for 45 minutes straight. So need to kind of get back in the groove of that. But hopefully I did give you guys some valuable information. I do want to get over to some of the questions you guys have. And there's a ton of questions. I get a ton of questions all the time from you guys. And so I really appreciate all the comments. And I'm going to try to get to as much as I can. One thing I will call out just one more time. Since this is my live stream, I do want to give myself a little bit of a chance to plug a little bit. Give me a second here. One thing that you can do that a lot of people enjoy is actually signing up for a one-on-one virtual fishing lesson with me. And if you do have specific questions about your lake and want me to break it down about how to fish grass lakes, northern lakes, how to fish Tennessee River Lake, how to break down your lake when you don't have Navionics, or if you don't have a Google Earth image that's drawn down, how do you still find fish? Book a one-on-one video lesson with me. I can explain everything that you need to know to find fish. I fished all over the country, fished tournaments in like 30 states, all over the place, and fish all over the place. So, I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. I also do a lot of research for these lessons. I spend an hour before every lesson researching and watching YouTube videos, breaking down the maps, looking at Google Earth, stuff like that, to give you guys a really good breakdown of what's happening. So this is a really good option if you do want me to look at your lake. And then also just another plug for those who weren't here at the beginning. I am going to be doing more map breakdowns, and I just added a table rock breakdown for the spring. So this is pre-spawn through the post-spawn, all these different areas. It's 59 areas on Table Rock Lake, and these spots were actually chosen by Randy Blockett, who is a professional fisherman, fished the Bassmaster Elite Series, fished the Bassmaster Top 100s, he fished FLW Tour, all kinds of stuff like that, and he is just an awesome guy. He actually guides on Table Rock Lake, and he's fished all over the country, $1.9 million in career earnings. He's fished 18 Bassmaster Classics or Forest Wood Cups, just depending on which year he was fishing each tour. So he's super knowledgeable, did a great job in all these breakdowns, and obviously I'm fact checking him just to make sure he's not giving you guys bad spots. He's giving you good stuff. He's giving you the juice. Don't worry. And we're going to be making a lot more maps. I'll have a summer Table Rock map out very, very soon. And we're just going to have a ton of awesome content. We'll have lakes, Table Rock Lake, Kentucky Lake, Gunnersville, Toledo Bend. We're going to be breaking down lakes all over the country. And so definitely keep checking in the website. We're going to be putting 4 maps out a week, hopefully, for these different breakdowns. So enough of all that stuff. Let me get over to the questions here and see what people have to ask. There's a ton of questions. I know I've been neglecting you guys over here, trying to just get through my my talking points though. So let me go through here. Oh man, a lot of questions. Holy cow. Okay, so Michael S. is asking, what's going on with the merch? I've actually shut down the merch shop for now, guys. Actually, my dad was handling all my merch distribution and stuff like that for me. He passed away in November, and so I just haven't had a chance to really get that up and running without him. And I still have hats and stuff, some hats and stuff available, or at least here in my apartment, but I just don't have the means to ship them right now, or the time, so I will want to try to get more hats out and stuff like that in the future. I just need to find a way to distribute them, just find time for that. Let's keep going through. Let's see here. More questions. Tony, bring back the fish moment hats. Okay, people want the merch. I get it. I get the hats. We'll figure that out. Dean's asking, what do you consider no wind? 5 to 7 mile an hour or less? No wind is like when there's barely a ripple on the water. So really, what I want to see is I want to see some waves crashing into the bank, and I want to have a good chop on the water. And usually on a bigger lake like this, even if you get a 3 to 4 mile an hour wind, I'm doing the wrong thing again. Here we go. Even if you get like a 3 or 4 mile an hour wind, if you have a straight west wind at 3 to 4 miles an hour and it's starting over here, there's going to be a section of your lake where that wind can pick up enough steam and build up enough waves where that you can have some decent waves crashing into a bank. Now, for example, if you have a straight west wind and you're trying to fish this little stretch of the lake, it's probably going to be dead calm because all that wind's going to be killed by these trees and you're going to have basically no wind right here. But again, if you're on a part of the lake, maybe like over here, where you have a big open space of water, these banks are going to get a lot more wind, and even if it's a very light wind, 3 to 5 miles an hour, it can still create enough wind for you to be able to get some bites. But usually, I like to see about a 5 mile an hour wind to 10 mile an hour wind if I want to fish on like a clear end of a lake. That's usually a good kind of threshold, 5 to 10. But you can make do with less wind if you're strategic about where you actually try to go fishing. And that's one thing I've talked about in our videos before, but like it's weird. Sometimes like this section of lake can be dead calm. This section of lake feels like there's a tempest going on. There's like all kinds of crazy wind. And this lake over here, again, is dead calm. So it just depends on where you are in the lake and where that wind funnels and channels on that given day. Let's see here. How much is to book a lesson with you? It's $100 for an hour. And again, I'm basically doing 2 hours because I'm doing an hour prep, an hour of the lesson, and I send you a recording of the lesson afterwards. And you can rewatch that lesson as many times as you want. And so not too bad of a deal there. Let's see here. And breakdowns for Toledo Bend, we're going to be doing that. And that's going to be in... that is going to be here pretty quick. I think this next week we're hoping to get those out. Let's see here. Oh, people are saying wrong screen, showing Navionics. Okay, so anyways, people are getting this good. See here. Next thing, sorry, I'm just scrolling through the comments, guys. I'm quiet. Some lakes may have the lake drawn down. That's Michael. Yes, so I could address that. Drew. Drew, I've had trouble lately with search baits when the bite is tough and the water is muddy. Have any tips for me? So, when the water's muddy, and that's probably a really big thing you guys are facing right now. Let me just go to the lake that's like muddy, like Dardanelle. When that lake is muddy, the big issue is that the strike zone for these fish get really, really small, like super tiny. And so you may only have, let's say you go down and you're fishing down a stretch of like trees, like there's some laydowns of trees right here, and this tree right here. If that water is like 6 inches of visibility, that fish's strike zone is so small, it's so compact that you have to bring that bait right by their face to get them to eat. And so usually it's not so much that you're fishing the wrong bait. Like a search bait is a good bait to fish when you have those muddy water conditions. I really like fishing like a big single Colorado bladed spinner bait or a double Colorado bladed spinner bait or a crankbait with a wide wobble. The big thing, though, is when you're in those muddy water conditions, the most important thing is your casting ability. If you can cast into tight quarters and make a lot of casts per hour efficiently, that's going to be your best friend. Whenever I get to a lake that's super muddy and like I can't find clear water, all I'm going to focus on is try to make like 1,000 casts a day, and I'm going to fish any sort of hard objects, hard cover that these fish can get around, whether that's some sort of like shallow grass, rocks, wood, stuff like that. And I'm just going to cover water. And one thing that's really helpful too is if you can find an area with some bait fish in it, that's usually a good indicator. And usually when you have that muddy water, it also means you have high water. And when you have high water, usually what happens is that these fish are going to push further back in the trees and in the bushes and stuff like that. And so it may also be that it's not so much that you're fishing the wrong bait or the wrong approach, you're just fishing in the wrong area. And so let me just go to a lake. Sorry, I'm trying to find this lake over here. Sometimes this lake can get really low, but you can also get very high. Let me find an image where the lake is up. So like sometimes when this lake gets really high like this and you have water that's like way up in the trees and in the bushes here, like in this case the water's like up back in here. A lot of times when that water is high and muddy, those fish will push super far back in these trees. And when you have that muddy water, the challenge is that those fish can't see very well, so they're not going to be biting very efficiently offshore. You can still get a few fish to bite offshore, like 5 to 8 foot of water, but it's going to be difficult to get those fish to eat offshore in that real muddy water. So the only way you can get those fish to bite really well is if you get shallow. But when that water's high, it's hard to get shallow enough because there's all these trees and bushes in the water. So what I like to do is really focus on trying to find a, trying to see if you can find a bank that doesn't have as much water on it, or in terms of like cover, not as much water, but not as much cover on it, so you can actually get into the bank. You can find an area where you can get behind the bushes towards that bank in that muddy water. That's a lot more efficient. And just try to find that hard bank line, or at least the inside line of the cover, and then fish real shallow, 1 foot to 2, 3 foot of water. Even if that water is super cold and you have like 45-degree water, if it's rising and muddy, those fish will be in 2, 3, 4 foot of water, especially on a sunny day. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see here. Michael, how do I go about finding submerged grass or find how deep my grass grows? So great question. Couple ways to do it. Really, one is just use your electronics to try to find the grass. Actually, let me pull up something real quick. I'm just gonna get this. I'm gonna black out the screen for a second. And I'm gonna pull up a sonar recording for you so that you can see what grass looks like underwater. This is not the best grass image in the world, because for whatever reason, all the lakes, I've wanted to do a lot of grass videos, guys, because I love fishing grass. It's one of my favorite things to do. But for whatever reason, all of my lakes that have grass, all the grass has died recently. Like Lake Washita and all these different places, and all the grass is dead, and I can't find any grass, and it's really annoying. But let me pull this image up for you. Give me 1 second here, guys. I'm just trying to get all this going. There we go. Okay, got that pulled up. So here is some grass for you. This is some underwater grass, and this is what it'll look like on your down imaging. It'll look very similar on 2D sonar. And so if you're trying to figure out how deep your grass grows, and if you have grass offshore, look for this. It kind of looks like shag carpet on the bottom, basically. And this is what you're looking for on your down imaging to see if there's grass in the area. And that's kind of what I'm looking for on my graph. And wherever you see that kind of shag carpet end, that's where the grass is ending. That's as deep as it'll grow. And then let me show you on side imaging what that looks like. I got a lot of recordings here. If you do a lesson with me as well, I have recordings of basically everything you would ever want from like a perspective of like grass, no grass, stuff like that. So don't worry if you don't know. Don't worry about me not having something on the graph. I have every image available. I just have 1,000 recordings. Let me try to find. Let's see here. Here we go. I have every single possible image you could ever want on side imaging. I've spent a lot of time trying to get all these captures. Here we go. This is image from Lake Washita of some grass and side scan. And there's a bunch of trees in the water here. I don't have any recordings of like clean grass because all my lakes down south that have grass have these standing timber around. So basically right here is your grass. And again, it kind of looks like that shag carpet or like a chia pet. I don't know if that's a reference people would get, but it's like, it looks just like kind of grass. You can see right here the grass ends. You get smooth bottom, and then you kind of get this rough kind of swirly bottom, swirly texture. This is your grass right here. This is where the grass ends. No grass, grass. No grass, grass. So you can see it in your side imaging as well, which is actually really helpful. You're trying to grass down like a graph or graph down a grass edge and stuff like that. So that is that. Let me see next question. Just let me pull up Google Earth again. There we go. Artie, good to see you, Artie. Says, my dad and I went fishing on Sunday, and the water temps on our lake are 60 to 64, and we couldn't find any spawning fish. Why is this? I'm actually making a video about that, Artie, that's going to be coming out in 2 days, and it's the top 5 misconceptions about spawning bass. And definitely check out that video when it comes out, because basically what I explained is that bass, water temperature doesn't really matter with spawning fish. Everyone says water temperature, when it hits 60 degrees, those bass are going to spawn. That's not necessarily the case. I found bass spawning in water temperatures as cold as 55 and as warm as 80 degrees, like 75, 80 degree water temperature. It's crazy. Water temperature is not the number one indicator of if fish are spawning. It gives you kind of a general idea of if they're spawning, but there's a lot of other factors that are more important. And so I'm going to address those in that upcoming video. I'm going to do a lot better job of explaining it in that video than I can right now. So just watch that video. It'll make sense and it'll answer your question on that for sure. Gary, when you're running around the lake scouting, is it about finding bait or other variables? Bait and birds. That's the two things I'm looking for. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm running into a first third of a creek. I'm going to run in here. I'm going to idle for 30 feet, 40 feet, maybe 30 yards. I wouldn't say 30 feet. 30 yards, idle for a bit. Then, well, you can't run in this creek. That's a really bad example. But let's just say it's this creek right here. This is a bad creek too. Where's a creek that I can run into? Here we go. It's just one. There's a bunch of boats right here, but ignore them. So I'll run to like the mouth of this creek and I'll graph around. I'll graph in several water depths, 50 foot up to 5 foot. And do I see any bait? Graph for 30, 40 yards? Nope. Run back here. Do I see any bait? Graph for 30, 40 yards. Do I see a bait on my graph? Nope. Run further back. Do I see any bait on my graph? Nope. And while I'm graphing as well, what I'm looking for on the bank is, do I see any blue herring or blue heron? Do I see any other birds like cormorants, or do I see like the seagulls or something diving? Or do I see like coots, which are little blackbirds that feed on grass? A lot of times if you find coots feeding, you'll know that there's grass in your area, which is also a good indicator. And so birds are super important for me. I catch more fish off of just following the birds than anything. And it's really funny because one of my best friends I fish Lake Dardanelle with, he always got on to me because when we were fishing lily pads up here on Lake Dardanelle, there's no good lily pads in Lake Dardanelle anymore, unfortunately. They all got washed away. But like 5-6 years ago, there was a ton of lily pads that were really good. And to catch fish on lily pads, literally what I would do, and they always laughed at me because they always thought I was just being crazy. But like, for example, like this stretch of lily pads right here, what I would do is I would run down the lake, I would run up to a stretch of lily pads, graph down it, see if there's bait fish out in front of the lily pads, and I would actually look at the lily pads and see if I saw black birds on the pads. And I swear, every single stretch of pads I found that had black birds on them, I would catch fish. If it didn't have black birds, I wouldn't catch fish there. And I feel like those fish are actually eating those black birds because I've seen them actually come up and try to bust on those birds. And so there's like used to be all these awesome stretches of pads, and I would look all over these pad stretches, and every time I'd find a little stretch that had 4 or 5 black birds, I'd pull up, catch 2 or 3 fish. Boom, boom, boom. And so those birds can be super helpful. And depending on the part of the country you're in, birds are going to be different, the types of birds you're looking for, stuff like that. But usually you're going to have blue heron in the south, and you'll have more of those like seagull birds up north. You also have the cormorants in the south. All those birds feed on bait, and they feed on bluegill, stuff like that as well, some of the bigger birds. And if you see those birds around the pads or around the stick-ups or the rock banks or whatever, there's a good chance there's fish there. Okay. And Brady says, are you planning on adding any more map breakdowns on your website anytime soon? More Arkansas lakes would be nice. Yes, Brady, we're gonna be doing 4 maps a week. Randy's gonna try and knock out as many as he can. We're just gonna try to do just a ton of maps across all different parts of the country. So we're gonna be doing some Arkansas maps, obviously. We're gonna be doing just a bunch of breakdowns in Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Florida, Kentucky, things like that. Not as many northern breakdowns. I'm actually on the lookout for someone pro that will do some northern breakdowns. I have one guy in mind that I really want to talk to who's actually a Bassmaster Elite Series pro right now, who could do some northern fisheries for me, and that way we'll know that we got some guys who are really good up north and got down south. So just stay tuned on that, but we will be doing lakes all around the country. Let's see here. And then some questions. Are you going to do breakdowns on Sheeran Harris or Jordan Lake? I actually can definitely do some breakdowns there. I was out on Jordan and Sheeran Harris, and actually it's crazy. On both the lakes these guys are talking about are over here. Let me pull up the map over here. Yeah, all those lakes are crazy. I was over there for a bass camp, and the areas that actually did my breakdown, I broke down Falls Lake before I actually ever went over there. And one of the spots in my breakdown, the guy who I was fishing with caught a 9-pounder off of it. And then also on Jordan Lake, during another fishing lesson, because I was there for like 2 weeks and did fishing lessons, a guy caught a 9-pounder on Jordan with me, and a guy caught a 9-pounder on Falls with me. Both those fish broke my personal best bass. I've never caught a 9-pounder before, but I've had 2 caught in the boat with me in the same week in North Carolina, in Raleigh. These lakes are crazy, guys. It's unbelievable, these lakes. And then I was fishing falls. My first 3 bass on Falls Lake, I was there in like September, were a 4.5-pounder, a 6 3/4 pounder, and a 5.5 pounder. So I had like a 5.5 pound average for my North Carolina bass. And then the next time I went out, I went to Sheeran Harris. We caught like 35 bass over 3 pounds out of this lake. This lake is crazy. So I can definitely use some breakdowns there. I know a lot of spots there now because I was there for like 2 weeks. So I can give you guys some spots. Let's see here. What do you suggest during the spawn when the water is falling on the lake? Mike P, I would definitely be looking for the bass that were spawning to actually pull out and get a little bit deeper off the bank. So we'll just stay here and just like look at Sheeran Harris, for example. A lot of these fish will be spawning, let's say, up in these pockets, like up shallower in these shallow bays and pockets. And what I would expect is that when that water is falling, those fish are just going to pull a little bit off the bank. They're not going to pull like way out into these offshore areas and things like that. Usually they're just going to pull like a few feet off the bank, and they're going to wait for that water to stabilize to continue spawning. What'll happen is when that water is falling, those bass don't want to lay their eggs, because when they lay their eggs and that water is falling, there's a chance that the eggs end up out of water, and they don't want to do that. So basically these big females will just pull out, chill really close to where they're about to spawn, and wait for that water to stabilize. And so usually if you just look on these like secondary points and try to fish in that 5 to 10 foot of water just out in front of where these bass would be spawning, you can find a lot of big females that way. And again, some bass are not going to be spawning all the time. I'll get into that in my 5 misconceptions of spawning video, because that's definitely something that I'll be talking about in that. Does the updated Google Earth allow you to go back to the previous year images? Haven't been able to find out how. Keith, it's probably because you're trying to look at Google Earth on your phone. The phone app does not allow you to go back in time. You have to do it on a desktop computer, and you have to download Google Earth Pro. So Google Earth Pro, Google Earth Pro, and you need it on your desktop, not on your phone app. The phone app does not allow you to go back in time. Let's see here. Oh, someone already got me. Sandy says, love your videos. Appreciate that, Sandy. And I would like to see a breakdown on Lake Hartwell. Bunch of requests on all these lakes. I can definitely, break down some lakes on the stream. Again, if there's a specific lake you want me to break down, best way is, again, so just book a one-on-one virtual lesson with me, and I can break down your lake that way. And then, or you can just wait maybe 3 or 4 months, and maybe I'll do your lake. There's a chance on a live stream, or one of these map breakdowns. It just kind of depends on what lakes we get to. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. So we're just kind of limited by manpower at this point. So other than that, guys, that is pretty much all I had for the stream. Let me actually go over here. You can see my big face. I got this new angle. The camera is kind of like close to my face. I don't know how I feel about that, but otherwise, basically, I am going to keep doing these live streams, guys, as I mentioned, and I'm going to be doing different topics every single stream. So I'm going to be posting polls on my Patreon page for all my Patreon members to vote on the topics I'm going to be talking about in these streams. So whether it's how to break down a lake with Google Earth, whether it's how to go fish offshore ledges, how to find good spawning areas, whatever it is, I'm going to have my Patreon members vote on those topics. I'm going to break them down during the stream and do a really good in-depth analysis, hopefully. Better than I did today, too. I feel like a little bit sloppy today, coming back from a long time not streaming. And so I'll be getting in the groove as we go forward here. But again, appreciate everyone's support on the YouTube channel as well as on the live stream and on my Patreon page as well. It is super amazing to get the support from you guys on Patreon, on YouTube, that allows me to actually do this full time. And despite all of the craziness going on in the world, we got people who can't even leave their homes, things like that. It's awesome that people are still able to support me and help me continue to do what I love to do. And I want to give back to you guys as best I can with live streams like this, with my videos, try to put out the best content possible so that you guys can learn as much as you can about bass fishing. So again, thanks so much for all the support. It's been amazing over these last few months, especially with everything going on. And so if you guys do enjoy the content, then definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel. I see a lot of guys guys who are on the stream, things like that, are not subscribed. So definitely go on, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It really helps me out. And just leave a like on my videos. It's something really simple, guys. If you are logged into your account, if you leave a like on my video, I get a lot more views. And if you also share out the videos, the YouTube algorithm really likes it when people like my videos and when they share them. So the best way you guys can support my channel, honestly, is just to like my videos and share them, and it helps me out a ton. So other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed the live stream, and I'm excited to get back to doing this, getting back in the groove of doing this, and I will be seeing you guys every single Tuesday night going forward, and we'll hopefully be able to relieve maybe some of the boredom you guys have while you're stuck at home. So thanks again for checking out the stream, and I'll see y'all next time.